Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we're taking a look at Meridia's Guardian. This is one of my oldest builds dating back to the beginning of my adventures in Tamriel, practically. When I first started playing Elder Scrolls Online, I created a build that was supposed to be a main tank build, and I kept getting told you can't play it, it doesn't work, that set doesn't work that way, you gotta use this set, and all this kind of stuff. Well, I finally settled on what I wanted to play using this build, and I used it for a long time, and then I wanted changing out one of the sets for another set, and then switching out from Sword and Board to Two-Handed, and all this kind of stuff. Well, I have decided it's best to go back to Sword and Board to make this tank really work, and that's what we're going to do with this build now, is we're going back to Sword and Board, but we are back with the Meridia's Guardian build. And this build has gone through so many iterations, guys. It's not even funny. A lot of you don't even realize like how many times I've remade this build to try and make it a better build and to try and make it a better build. But I've always gone back to certain sets and utilizing those sets. But it is a Wood Elf tank still. And we'll go ahead and get right into it. Now, you don't have to use a Wood Elf. You guys have to understand, a lot of these builds that I'm offering right now, the race of choice is just the one that I think would work best for the type of build it is. For this one, I've always been a fan of elves, and Wood Elf is one of my favorite races in any MMO. It doesn't matter what it is. If there's an elf, I'm playing it. So, but Wood Elf is actually one of my favorite races, dating back to Pen and Paper Dungeons & Dragons. So let's get into this class, the build. It is a Wood Elf Templar tank. Now, like I said, you can use other races for it. It's really up to you to decide on how you want to put it together. The thing that you need to understand is when you make a build, you want to try and keep it as close to the original source as possible if you're going to utilize that build structure. Because a lot of times when you make a build, you put it together in such a way that you want it to work in a specific way. And this build really is specific. So let's get right into it. 16k magicka, 36k health, 25k stamina. Now, a lot of people have been asking me lately why I've been doing all these main tanks with 35, 36, 40k health and a 25k stamina. One of the reasons is that 25k stamina is just kind of what I call a sweet spot. When it comes to making playing a tank in this game, I play by a certain rule, and that is called 20-32. And that means like my primary stat has to be 32,000 or higher. My secondary stat has to be 20k or higher. So in some cases, it's better to go a little bit higher just to get those little extra benefits that it offers you. And this does that really well. It actually grabs that whole concept of my build structure and runs with it like crazy. So 25k stamina is basically good for the fact that we're not using a lot of block cost reduction stuff like the meta does. We actually use less of that, but we have compensated by increasing the stat pool. So if none of you know, before Morrowind, a lot of tanks used to run 3 infused, and then 4 sturdy, and then usually they ran a reinforced shield, or they ran a sturdy shield, or they even ran an infused shield with a defending weapon. But since then, times have changed, and gear sets have changed, and builds have changed, and they've done a lot of changes, and I've always tried to keep my build in a certain structure, usually around 30k health, 30k stamina, but when I put it at 25k, I realized nothing really changed. Like, I lost a little bit of DPS, or damage, but not a whole lot. So that's why I went with this setup here. We have an 846 magic recovery. This is perfect for what abilities. We only use 2 magic abilities on this build. And those 2 magic abilities don't eat up a lot of resources. They eat up about 6k. And that 846 magic recovery just gives you enough recovery to get that back in return. So now, because we are Wood Elf, we get a really high stamina recovery. 21% because of our race, and that's how we have 119 stamina recovery, or 1,119 stamina recovery. It really works out really well. Moving on down here to the weapon, as you guys can see, the weapon damage is 1868. This is a little bit less than what I normally run. I usually try to keep it around 2K, but it's okay because with this build, that's like, again, the sweet spot. Weapon critical is 23%. Tanks don't have to worry, especially main tanks don't have to worry too much about weapon critical. They're not there to do like burst damage or anything like that. They're there just to bring some extra. So having that little bit of extra weapon damage, that little bit of crit, and that chance to crit really plays with this build. But this build actually does get increased crit, just not in the way you think. So moving on, we have a 27k spell resistance with a 24k physical. Now I want to show you guys this just so you guys can see. When you buff up with this build, you actually go to a 32k spell with a 29k physical. This is really in a good spot. 29% or 29k is 48% mitigation. So you're going to mitigate 48% of the damage that you normally take. So it's not quite 50, but it's close enough that that few little percent you're really not going to notice. Now this is going to be at 32k, which is right at the cap almost. 33,000 is the cap of spell and physical resistance for our characters in the game. And so it puts us almost at the cap, which is good. So we're still sitting around a 49.5% mitigation, but the game counts it as 49. So we're sitting at a 49% spell mitigation, which is still good. Moving down here, we are running the Lady Mundus Stone, and we are running Traced Out Food. Now, if you guys are wondering why I have these three things here, these are because I'm running a skill on my bar that gives me both, or all three of these, and only on this bar. If I switch bars, you're going to see I lose those benefits. But that's okay. I can lose those benefits and still be good. Don't worry about it. So, we are running Tri-Stat Foods and a Tri-Stat Pot, and there's good reason to that, and I'll show you guys here in a second. So, moving on to the gear. Over here in the gear, we are running a kind of really similar gear sets of what I've always ran in the past, except instead of running my normal Kvetch's Gladiator, I've actually removed that and have gone with a new thing, which is 5-piece Meridia's Blessing. Now, a lot of people have told me in the past that this set does not apply the blind to all enemies in the game. And they're correct, it doesn't. It doesn't affect bosses. That's the only thing the blind does not affect. Now, I've tested this in trials countless times now, including the newest trial, and it still works in the new trial. It's just that that whole trial, the new trial, is all bosses, so it doesn't apply the blind. Halls of Fabrication, it applies the blind to everything but bosses. Everything. You take this build through a dungeon, everything but the bosses. So it's really good in like crowd control against trash and giving that extra chance of them not hitting you for 5 seconds. So it's just a good way to maintain your character's survivability when you're inside of a dungeon or even in a trial and you're fighting trash. So Meridia's Blessing is really good at that. Next up, we're running Swarm Mothers. This is a 2-piece monster set, and as you can see, it just gives us a little bit of stamina recovery, and that's all you really need when you're playing a Wood Elf, is just a little bit. So this, especially on a tank, it just a little bit helps, and it'll carry you into huge numbers. So we have a really good stamina recovery with this build, and as you guys can see, I'm running Infused here on the helm, Infused chest, Infused legs, and everything else is sturdy. So I'm running 5 pieces of the Meridia's Blessed set, and I'm running 2 pieces of Swarm Mothers. Now, Swarm Mothers is a really unique set that works really good on any tank, to be honest, because anytime you block an attack, you can pull enemies from 5 meters away to you, and this can happen every second. So if you're getting attacked by multiple enemies, you just throw a block and you just hold it, and next thing you know, they're getting rubber banded to you really fast. But it only affects normal mobs. So it doesn't affect some elite mobs in trials, but any of the trash mobs, almost 90% of the trash mobs are affected by that pull. So it's a really good way to get those enemies to you and stack them up so you can burn them down with your AoEs and the stuff of your group. Moving on to the next set, and this is my bread and butter of this build always is Plague Doctor. Wood Elves do not get a high health bonus. So they have no health bonus. So Plague Doctors is a really good set for them to run, especially in this setup, because it gives them a lot of health increase. Now you're going to say, well, you don't have anything that boosts extra ultimate gem. Don't worry about it. It's really not needed. A lot of people blow this whole ultimate thing way out of the water. All you really need is a couple heavy attacks and heroic slash, and you're good. You can generate anywhere between 3 to 4 ultimate per second per attack. So like, I'll generate ultimate from heroic slash 1 every so many seconds, and then with a heavy attack you get 2 ultimate every 2 seconds. So every time you do a heavy attack you gain 2 ultimate. So it helps you build ultimate really quick, and all together it's like, it's 3 ultimate every 2 seconds, but still 3 ultimate every 2 seconds is pretty good when you think about it. So, and that doesn't include the extra one you're earning, so you actually gain 4 every 2 seconds. Well, 5 if you count because you get 1 every second because of light or heavy attacks for 9 seconds, then you get the 1.5 seconds from heroism, and yeah, you just get a lot of ultimate, okay? So it's a really good set though for that good health. And as you can see, I have magic recovery on this glyph. On these two, I'm running weapon damage. Now, a lot of people say tanks don't need damage. Okay, that's just opinion. I think they do. And so that's why I have weapon damage on there. Next up, I'm running 2 Nirnhone shields. Now, the reason I'm running tri-stats in the shields is because the same reason why I'm running tri-stats in these bigger pieces up here. You get the greater benefit out of these pieces with the tri-stats than you do out of the smaller pieces. That's why I'm running max health here. Now look how much max health I'm getting. I'm getting almost 400, and I get 500 from here. So I'm almost getting equal amount, but I'm also getting magicka and stamina, and this is what this build really needs. It needs that extra magicka, and it needs that extra stamina. So, moving on to the 2 swords, both are infused. One is running a Crusher enchant, one is running hardening. The main bar one is hardening, and as you can see, it's a 5,000 point damage shield. This is to kind of help you get into tanking at the end game. You know, it's just there to, like an extra cushion, to mitigate some extra damage kind of thing. When you get comfortable with in game, you can actually drop this and go Crusher on both bars if you want. Moving on to the back bar, we are running a Crusher enchant. As you can see, it applies 2,108 extra spell and physical resistance pin on the enemies. So it reduces their spell and physical resistance by 2,180 or 108. Really good to have, especially on a tank who's applying Major Breach and Major Fracture already. But here's the thing that people say, well, I've always asked, like, why do tanks run this if they're not doing damage? Well, that's why I put weapon damage in here, because that weapon damage does stack up. It doesn't matter what you're playing, whether you're playing a tank, a healer, or DPS. Anything you can do to increase the group's total damage is more beneficial than standing there and holding block all the time. No offense to the tanks that play that way. That's your choice. I choose not to. I've actually become accustomed to tactical blocking this game. It's second nature for me as a player, because I've become so accustomed to the mechanics of 90% of the dungeons and probably 2% of the trials that I know when to block. I know when I can drop block, when I can do other things. And then I hear this. Well, that means you're going to be relying on your healer a lot. That's part of teamwork, guys. Teamwork, you're in a team for a reason. Your healer's there to heal the group. That includes you. If you've got to drop block to get resources back, you have to do that. It's part of the game. The game's designed with that. So that's what we have to do. And that's what I've learned to do. I've learned how to when to block, when not to block, when to heavy attack, when not to heavy attack. It's just part of my nature to take up that, you know, that okay, I got to do this now. So that's it for the gear and the stats and everything. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the skills. And again, guys, I'm going to go over the skills and all their passives and tell you why you need their passives. I'm not going to go through every individual passive, but there is a few I do want to point out here with the Templar and why the Templar actually is the second best tank in the game, minus the DK. Now, a lot of people argue the Warden's better. The Warden offers some utility that the Templar doesn't have, but what the Templar has, no other class has. So moving down the list here, you want to make sure that you always get all your passives for everything in your class, so no matter what. This is just a given thing. Now, if you're using the skill advisor is going to tell you which ones to take for the tank role. That's fine. You can take those ones, but make sure you wind up getting all of them in the end anyways. So going through here, this is the main tree, and I call this the tank tree because everything here has to deal with tanking in some degree. Piercing spear increases your critical damage done against blocking targets by 10% while you have an Age or Spear ability slotted. So if you guys don't know what that means, if I hit an enemy with a critical hit and they block the attack, I still get 10% of my damage to go through that block. So it still does damage. It's a really powerful thing, especially even when you're fighting a lot of bosses or a lot of NPCs who do use sword and shield. You can just kind of just, you know what, fine, block it and heavy attack them. Or if you can, a light attack. But we don't have a lot of crits, so you just got to be careful with that. Next up is Spear Wall. This is super essential to this build, and this is why you need an Age or Spear ability on both bars. It increases the amount of damage you can block from melee by 15%, and your that right there alone can help out in a lot of trial situations that a lot of people don't look at. Hellrust Citadel, anyone? Yeah, end game or the end boss with the axes? Yeah. Best tank for it. Sorry, I have to call it out. And it's true. Because you mitigate 15% of melee attacks, the Templar actually works better at tanking the axes. Because you mitigate a lot more damage from it. Next up, they get a really cool ability called Burning Light. Now, Burning Light is basically something that allows you to deal some extra damage. This is another reason why I run Blazing Shield. Because when Blazing Shield comes off, as you can see, it actually explodes, dealing damage. So this damage that it applies also can trigger this. And it has a 25% chance to trigger it, doing 3,222 physical damage. And it's based off of whatever stat you have that's higher. So like this one does more stamina damage or physical damage. If I had more magicka-based damage, it would be more magicka damage. But it works either way. I love this skill because it can happen every 0.5 seconds. And this is where another skill we're going to be running comes into play. And this is our other ability on our back bar. This is just for helping clear trash in dungeons and in trials to help out with a little bit more DPS. Biting Jabs. Biting Jabs is an amazing ability. Does a lot of damage, regardless of you know how much stamina, weapon damage, that kind of thing you have. It can do a lot of damage because it does a rapid attack. So it's a 1.1 second channel, and if I fire this off, it hits about 6 times or 5 times. And when it hits those 5 times, it does so much physical damage up front, and then it does so much damage every hit. But it also hits multiple targets in a cone, like a rectangle shape in front of you. It reduces their movement speed, so it does CC. And then on top of that, it grants you Major Savagery, which increases your weapon critical for 8 seconds. Now, that's good for you. It's good for DPS. It's also good for you because you can manage this and then hit him with a Reverb Bash or hit him with a Heroic Slash and get some extra damage out of it. Or you can hit him with a heavy attack and get some extra damage out of it. There's a lot of options with this. So going back to over this stuff, the next one's Blessed Balance Wear. This is really essential to the Templar tank, because it increases your weapon damage by 6%, and it increases your spell resistance. If you guys didn't know this, that's 6%, and the 5% you get for sword and board, that's 11% more weapon damage. Just those two things of weapon damage glyphs almost put me at 2,000 weapon, you know, like close to 2,000 weapon damage, which is really good for me as a tank. Alright, so now that we've done that, the class stuff, we're going to move down here. Make sure you unlock all your sword and shield passives. Make sure you unlock your light armor passives, because you're going to need some of these. The thing you have to understand about being a Templar also is Templars get a 4% reduced cost in Magicka, Stamina, and Ultimate. So you really need these light armor and medium armor passives, because you don't only get the 4%, but you actually get an extra 2%. So your magic abilities are 6% less. Your stamina abilities are 6% less. This saves you resources, so you can actually activate abilities a little bit more often than other classes. So the DK has really good resource management through its one of its passives that allows it to get resources back whenever it uses an ultimate. I don't need to worry about that because I get reduced cost in my abilities. And this also applies to the medium armor, like I said, the extra 2%. So you want to make sure you get these passives and unlock them. Next up, you also want to make sure you unlock all heavy armor passives. Moving down the line to soul magic, get these 2 passives. These are just beneficial. You don't have to have them. They're just beneficial to have. So next up, make sure you get intimidating presence from the Fighters Guild and banish the wicked. This is really good for you because it generates you 9 ultimate every time you kill an enemy that's a Daedra, undead, or werewolf. So you can generate a lot more ultimate. Now, I've been asked also, are these builds that I'm making solo play? Can you play, like, the quest? Can you play dolmens? Can you play the... Yes, you can do all that stuff. You can solo that stuff. You might take you a little longer, but you can still do it. That's why I made these builds the way I did, is so that they have the capability to solo play and be in group play. Moving on to the Mages Guild, you just need Persuasive Will here, and then on to Undaunted. Make sure you unlock Inner Beast. This is the Inner Fire morph. It's a stamina morph. You want to make sure you unlock this so that way you have a ranged taunt when you need it for whatever situation. It's very situational normally because you only need one taunt most of the time. And you only need a ranged taunt when you're in, like, you know you're going to need it kind of thing. And so you can equip it, you can swap it out with other abilities on your discretion. Next up is Undaunted Command. You're going to want to make sure you get this passive and the Undaunted Metal passive. Again, you guys remember I was talking about, like, why you want the medium armor and light armor? You also need it for this purpose as well, so you can get that 6% extra health, stamina, and magicka. Moving down the line again, we have on the assault skills, we have Aggressive Warhorn and we have Resolving Vigor. Now, Resolving Vigor doesn't work as effectively for you as it does for a stamina DPS, but the one thing that's nice about Resolving Vigor is it's a nice heal. And especially when being a Templar. See, Templars get minor mending when they use your Restoring Focus ability. You'll get minor mending applied to you, so that heal is actually boosted by 8%. Not much, but it's just enough to kind of carry you through that and give your, extra healing. Alright, so after those abilities, you do want to unlock this one ability here called Reviving Barrier. You're going to run this on your back bar for a damage shield for your allies and a heal over time for your allies. But this is something you're not going to be using a lot while you're in a trial. You're going to be using this a lot in dungeons. Now, you can use it in a trial if you see a lot of people getting hurt really bad, especially in, like, Halls of Fabrication or in Asylum Sanctorium. This works really good to mitigate a lot of that over excessive damage you take. It just helps group survivability. But make sure you have this on your bar so you can get this. Now, you can unlock this and Efficient Purge. So if you do need a purge to cleanse, like, your group members and stuff, you can get it and unlock it. I prefer to run this on my healers. Moving on to Wood Elf. The racial skills. Always unlock your racial skills. And then on the crafting side, you want to make sure you get medicinal use. This way you get 30% increase in the time frame of your medicine or your potions, so that they last 30% longer. And then also make sure you get your provisioning stuff, Gourmand and Connoisseur. These make your foods last 20 minutes longer. And that's it for the skills. We're going to go over the skill bars. And please understand, guys, I put together these builds for specific, specific ways, because some of these classes lack abilities that other classes have. So, like, when it comes to, like, what everybody normally plays, the DK, some classes lack chains, and they have no way to bring enemies to them. So either you can choose to use the ranged taunt, or you can choose to use Shielded Assault. Now, Shielded Assault is a gap closer. That means it allows you to travel from one destination to another within a certain range. Now, this thing has a 22-meter range. So you have a pretty long distance that you can travel to get to your enemies with this ability. And it does a small amount of damage, not a whole lot, but it stuns the enemy for 2 seconds, and it gives you a 5k damage shield. Now, this is also on the same side we're running a hardening enchant. So you don't only end up with a 5k shield, you get a 10k shield, right, just like that. Now this shield lasts for 6 seconds. The hardening enchant lasts for 5. So that's a 10k shield that lasts for roughly 5 seconds. One lasts a little longer. Next up is Pierce Armor. This is essential to most tank builds, and that's because it applies Major Breach and Major Fracture. It also does a little bit of damage, and it taunts the enemy. Now remember, tanks do not focus damage on applying ability or using abilities to do damage. They use lots of light and heavy attacks. That's how they work best, is those light and heavy attacks with the abilities to apply effect. Next up is Blazing Shield. Now Blazing Shield is a super awesome shield because it does it based off of your max health. It's a percentage of your max health in the shield strength. Now in the case of this one, when I activate this, I end up with like almost a 14k damage shield, and then when you add the 5k to it, I get like a 19k damage shield while I'm on this bar. So I can mitigate 19k worth of damage. Now that will that's 19k that will be absorbed by these shields. It's a really effective way when it comes to tanking to mitigate damage using damage shields. Now a lot of DKs run their damage shield, and they either take Obsidian Shield or they take Igneous Shield, or sorry, Fragmented Shield or Igneous Shield. Most take Igneous Shield for the 25% major mending. I like to take Fragmented Shield because I like that little burst of explosive damage it does at the end. So the nice thing about Blazing Shield, though, is because it does the 36% of your max health, it also does it based on the enemies around you. So the more enemies that are around your character, the bigger the damage shield becomes. So if you have 3, 4, 5 enemies within 5 meters of you, a bunch of enemies stacked up on you, and you pop your damage shield, that's a much bigger damage shield. On top of that, when the shield explodes outwards, it deals 50% of the damage it absorbs. So you got to remember, I apply that damage shield, it's 13,000. It does 50% of that back to the enemies. That's 6k damage back to the enemies. It's just extra damage that I can do. Moving on to the next ability, Absorb Magic. Now this is a nice, like, mitigate some magic damage, get some health back kind of ability. But it's the passive that it does while it's slotted that you want this for. And that's the ability to block 8% more damage. So remember, when I block, I get 15% extra from melee attacks. Well, that 15% now just got boosted by 8%. And then I have 36% from Sword and Shield passive, and I have 20% from Undaunted. I have 16% from wearing sturdy gear, and then this 8%. So I get a lot of mitigation. It's just, it's not as much as it seems, but we have a higher stamina pool to compensate. It also reduces the cost of your block costs by 8%. This is kind of the nice thing. So you can mitigate 8% more damage along with the, 20%, and that 15%. So you get 28% damage mitigation. It's not quite as good as a DK because they get 10% passively, like naturally. So they get a lot more damage mitigation with Sword and Shield. But the Templar does get a better damage shield, no offense. The nice thing about the DK one is it applies to your whole group. The Templar doesn't do that. Moving on to the next ability. The next ability we're running is Repentance. And this is where we get that minor fortitude, minor endurance, and minor intellect. But the nice thing about Repentance is it's a free cast. It doesn't cost you any resources. And it gives you health back, and it gives you stamina back for each enemy corpse in the area. So for every enemy that's lying dead around you, every time you pop Repentance, you get a heal, and you get stamina back. So it allows you to keep your stamina resources managed, but it also allows you to keep your health of yourself and your group, because it'll heal you and your group. So it's a nice little heal to have. Next up is Aggressive Warhorn. Most main tanks should run Aggressive Warhorn. Most. And that's because it does 10% max magicka, stamina, and health to you and your allies within 20 meters. And it also gives you Major Force, which increases your critical damage done by 15%. Now, if you're lucky enough to get a critical hit off during this time, good. That's better for you. But like I said, this tank is not designed just to do extra damage, you know, like a ton of extra damage. It's just to give some extra damage to the group. Moving on to the back bar, we are running Reverberating Bash. Now this is a floater ability. You can swap this out with inner fire, whatever you want, really. But I love this ability. I really do. I love the fact that it has a 3-second stun on it that works against any mob except for bosses, again. It's a stamina ability, so in some dungeons this is going to play better for you because most of the like magic casters who cast silence and stuff, it doesn't affect this ability, so you can still utilize it. This ability does apply Major Defile as well, which reduces the healing received of the enemy by 33%. So it reduces their health recovery by 33% and their healing received by 33%. It's a really good ability to use, especially on some boss encounters against some trash mobs where there's a healer involved. It's just a nice ability to have. You don't have to run this. You can run Inner Fire if you need that ranged taunt. Next up is Heroic Slash. This is going to be your ultimate gen. As you can see, it grants minor heroism. It also applies minor maim, and it's the longest lasting minor maim in the game. You won't find anything that lasts that long anywhere else. All the other ones are 4 to 6 to 8 seconds. This is 12 seconds of minor maim. That means it reduces their damage done by 15% for 12 seconds. It also comes with a taunt not a taunt, sorry. Reduced movement speed by 60% for another 12 seconds. And then on top of that, you get the physical damage, which is kind of nice. So the next ability I already went over, this is Biting Jabs. This is a really great ability because when you use Biting Jabs, it applies a 2-second reduced movement speed by 70%. So it practically stops them in their track. When you hit them with this right afterwards, it will slow them down even more. So you can have this hit them and then pop this. This will get that increase of the crit chance, and you get that, that extra damage in there and stuff, and that reduced movement speed, and then hit them with this, it reduces their movement speed again. Really good CC between the two. You can manage CC really well with this, but you are going to be using quite a bit of stamina, so make sure that when you do this, afterwards, you heavy attack. Next up is Resolving Vigor, and Resolving Vigor is a really good heal, like support heal for your group. It alleviates some of the healing that you need to do, the healer needs to do, because you're going to be applying this in a 10-meter radius. So this is going to affect you and any nearby people within 10 meters, and they're going to get healed over time. The heal for them is going to be a lot less than the heal for you. So just remember that. Now, the other heal, the other Vigor version, is actually cheaper, I think, and it doesn't give you a greater heal for you. So next up is Restoring Focus. This is what grants you your Major Ward and Major Resolve. Now, here's the thing a lot of people have a misconception about. When you set this down, I can stand in it, and as you can see, I get a little glowing aura, but I can walk out of it, and I have 8 seconds of this. Now, watch my Minor Mending just went off. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to get Minor Mending back. Now, this is how you get your major buffs for resistances, but it also gives you something else. It gives you Minor Vitality, which increases the healing received, so that Vigor is going to hit you for more. And it's also going to grant you Minor Protection, which reduces the incoming damage taken by 8%. So this is a really, really good defensive ability for the Templar. In fact, I would say if you're playing a Templar tank, this is the ability you want to run. Mainly because it does give you all that mitigation. Moving on to the last ability, and that is Reviving Barrier. Reviving Barrier is a really powerful damage shield, group damage shield. This thing has a 12-meter radius, and anyone within that 12-meter that gets hit by this thing will get a damage shield that lasts for 30 seconds. That 30-second damage shield is 27,872 damage mitigated, and it gives you a 18,816 heal over that 30 seconds. So as long as the damage shields apply, you also help heal your allies. So this is why I say this is a really good support ability, especially for a Templar to run, because they're not like the DK. They don't have that auto shield they can just like spam kind of thing. These guys can literally keep this up quite a bit and quite easily. So this is why this is really, really good for that kind of setup. And that's it for the skills. So let's go ahead and take a look at the champion points. And this is, you're going to see a lot of similarities between a lot of my tanks and their champion points. And that is because it just works. Okay, it just works really good, this setup. So on the main tree here, or onto the red tree, we have 37 points into Ironclad. Now, another thing I want you guys to remember is when you put 100 points into your red tree, you will get the maximum stat bonus from this. It's a 20% increase to your max health, max stamina, max magicka. So all those pools will be boosted by 20% once you put 100 points into this, 100 points into this, 100 points in this. But that will only happen when you earn a total of 300 CP. So you have to earn a total of 300 CP in order to put 100 into each tree to get the greatest benefit of those things. So down here we have 37 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken by 15%. Now, you guys, I told you guys that Restoring Focus gives us 8% minor protection, which is 8% damage reduction. That does not stack with this. It stacks with Hardy and Elemental Defender. So that's 18% from these two, because I put 43 points into both of these. So I get 18% Flame, Frost, Shock, and Poison damage, 18%, sorry, that, and then Poison, Disease, and Physical. So I get all that right here, extra 8%. These will stack on top of that 18%. So I end up with a 33% damage mitigation from damage over time, and from this. Now these abilities, even if I'm holding block, like, and it's a direct damage ability, it has to go through that 50% mitigation I practically have. It has to go through the 20% damage I mitigate with my shield, the 28%, then the 70 or 50 something, and then the 36 something. It has to go through all those. So in total, I end up having like a 70 something damage mitigation. Not quite 79 like the DK, but it's like 68, 74, something like that. I don't have the math like in front of me, so I can't tell you. And then moving on over here, we have 56 into Bastion. Now, Bastion, the 56 points in here, healers are going to do this, and tanks can do this. The reason tanks want the 56 points is they want that mitigation from their damage shields. They want those greater damage shields to mitigate more damage. Next up, we have 16 in Expert Defender. This reduces all light and heavy attack damage, and this actually stacks with all those others, giving you a 43% damage mitigation against light and heavy attacks. So this can help you mitigate even more damage. And then 8 in a Quick Recovery. This gives us 2% healing received. Remember how I was telling you guys, like, we get 8% from that minor vitality? You also get another 8% from wearing 5 pieces of heavy armor. That's 16%. With this, that's 18%. Or, yeah, 18% healing received. That's a lot. Plus you have, like, 20 or an 18 or 16% healing done. 18% healing done. So moving on over here, we have 23 into Warlord. This reduces our break free cost by 10%, saves us stamina. That's what it's all about. Managing resources when you're in combat. This allows you to save 10% of your stamina when you break free. This allows you to save 10% of your stamina when you bash. Bashing costs a lot. So be careful when you bash, because it does cost stamina, but this allows you to save some of that stamina. And moving on to the next tree, we have 43 into Mooncap, 43 into Arcanist, and 43 into Tenacity. Now you guys are probably wondering why. Well, what else get a 10% or 21% stamina recovery? On top of that, I'm a Templar, and with that one Repentance on my bar, I get another 10%. I get 6% or 4% from one piece of medium armor, and then I get an extra 10% here. So I get a lot of extra recovery. I think it's 21, 35, 45, 45% stamina recovery. It's not too bad. Moving on to the next one, we have 10% into Arcanist, and this we honestly only get like 24%. Either bar, it doesn't matter. And that's because we're not wearing a whole bunch of light armor. We're wearing all heavy armor, so getting that 24% really plays on it. And then, of course, the final one is this Tenacity. Now, whenever you do a fully charged heavy attack, you automatically get 30% of your resources back. Wearing 5 pieces of heavy, you get 25%. with this is 10%. You get a total of 65% of your resources back when you do a heavy attack. And then moving on to over here, we have 56 in the Shadow Ward. This increases your block cost chance, or block cost reduction by 20%. And then 10 into Befoul. This increases the effect of that reverberating bash, making it work more effective by 10%. So this is really good. And then on top of that, we have 6 into Tumbling. Now, you have 4% from the medium armor passive, and this just gives you an extra 2%. So you end up with like a 6% reduced cost. Like I said, it's all about resource management. The green tree is all about that. And this gives you a way to reduce like cost of things, everything like that, and you want to save resources. This is the best way to do it, is make sure you kind of put points where they're most needed and utilize those other ones as time goes. So moving on to the blue tree, the final tree, we have 43 in the Bless. This increases your healing done by 10%. I just want to show you guys this real quick. When you use this ability, you get a passive here called Sacred Ground, which it gives you minor mending. So when I use this ability, my healing just went up by 8%. That means my resolving vigor went up, increased in its healing capabilities. You can see almost 10k for me. So when I pop this, I get 9,000 health over 5 seconds. That's a pretty good amount of health for me and for my group. And I can keep this up even while blocking. I can pop it, do this, and I can do this. And then drop my block, heavy attack, get my resources back. I'll be showing you guys that here in a second. So going back into the blue tree, we're going to move to Antarok. Now this Antarok is essentially the tank's tree, okay, for damage. I know a lot of people don't believe that, but it's true, because tanks focus mainly on light and heavy attacks. If they do not get their damage capabilities up there. There's also a lot of things in here that reference tanking. So we have 35 points in the physical weapon expert. This gives us a 20% increase into our light and heavy attacks with any melee weapon or any stamina based weapon. So we're using sword and shield. Our light and heavy attacks are increased by 20%. We have 56 in the Master at Arms. Again, another 20%. That is a 40% increase. That's a lot of damage coming out of that light attack for you, because you just increased it by 40%. Now, the more weapon damage you have and the more stamina pool you have, the greater the damage will be. So, but this just works out really well. Next up, we have 23 into Shattering Blows. Increases the damage done to enemies with a damage shield. So remember that one I told you guys about when you block? Like when an enemy blocks, you get 10% more damage to them through the block. This allows you to get 10% through them even if they're wearing a damage or have a damage shield. There's a lot of NPCs in the game that apply damage shields. This helps you do more damage to them, and it can just help out overall. Next up, we get Retaliation, which is awesome because when you block a heavy attack, your next light attack is increased by 30% for 7 seconds. Now remember, this is 40 and 40. That's 70% more damage that you're going to do. Now the cool thing is that we also get Reposit. So anytime I block a melee attack, I redirect I have a 15% chance to redirect some damage back to them for 4,162. Well, the funny thing is, and a lot of people don't know this about the Templar, when I have this up, and I hold block, I can still get Reposit to go off. So that means I can get Reposit and the Blazing Shield to hit them at the same time almost. So together between the two, that can be upwards to 20 or 10k damage, and even higher because of the burning thing passive in the Adric Spear line in Burning Light. And so I can get a little bit more damage out of the character because of that. It's a really, really cool ability. And then, of course, last but not least, Butcher. Whenever the enemy gets below 25% health, you increase your light and heavy attacks by 5%. So now that 70% becomes 75%. That's if you block their heavy attack and they have to do that. But we're going to move on to the next tree. And, of course, we're going to have points in here as well. We're going to have 43 points in the Mighty. This is going to increase your physical damage done by 10%. Now, you can put more points. You can take the 23 out of here if you want and put more points in here. You can even take this up to 75 if you wanted to. But honestly, it's really just, that's just overkill. You're only going to get 4% more out of it. And that's too much of a waste of resources. So that's why I put the 23 into precise strikes, is to increase my critical strike damage by 10%. So this increases my physical damage by 10%. This increases my critical strike damage by 10%, and it just overall helps out in damage. Next up, we have 17 into piercing, and this just gives us extra penetration, because that's something that a lot of tanks don't have, is extra penetration, so they can do more damage. So this gives you a way to produce a little bit more greater damage numbers. Now I'm going to show you guys this build real quick. I'm going to show you guys on a target skeleton the type of damage that it does, and you're not going to see a super whole lot, because I don't have a whole lot of damage penetration or physical penetration like I do when I'm in the open world. So in the open world, I'm going to get a lot more damage out of my character. In a dungeon, I'm going to get a lot less. And in a trial, or a vet dungeon or a vet trial, I'm going to get even less. So a normal dungeon and trial, I'm going to get a little bit less or a little bit more. And then, of course, in the last one, that's going to be a lot less. So here we go. We're going to start with taunt. That's going to apply major breach, major fracture. We're going to switch bars. We're going to hit him with this, which is going to apply the crusher. And you can see my light attacks are hitting for upwards to 2 to 3k unless I crit. And that right there is going to add up in time. Now, for me to kill this guy right here, it would take me about 25 minutes maybe by myself. But I could do it. I could kill that skeleton. And maintain my resources just like anyone else parsing on that thing. I just wanted to show you guys how that works. But basically, the way you start with this build when it comes to tanking, the first thing you're going to want to do is not do this. Don't do that. Even though it's a good idea to have your extra resistances, just start with your shield charge, because that's a 10k shield. Taunt, heavy attack to get your resources back, pop your shield. Then switch bars, drop this, and then if you have time, heroic slash, and then just make sure you keep an eye on that heroic slash debuff on the enemy. Because as soon as it hits to about 1, you're going to want to swap bars, heroic slash again, and then if you want, you can even reverb bash, hit him with biting jabs, whatever. Do this, you know, keep this circle down. It's just tanking 101, guys, after this. Maintaining stuff and just keeping things applied. You want to make sure you keep that taunt applied. You're going to want to make sure you keep your damage shield up. You want to make sure you keep heroic slash, biting jabs when you need it, then heroic slash if you need it, reverb bash. Just try and keep things consistent. So that way you're not wasting resources. You're not sitting here fiddling around. You want to keep maintaining, tanking, and keeping those debuffs on the enemy. Now, Crusher, you're not going to be able to keep up as effective as, say, like what they use in the meta. But that's fine. Don't stress it, because the DPS builds I'm going to be releasing, some of them will be using Crusher enchants. And that's to make... So you guys understand this. The builds I'm releasing are going to have the dynamics of the meta, but in a different group setup. They're going to have the same dynamics, just in a different group, organized group setup. So, but that's it for Meridia's Guardian. I hope that you guys like the changes I made to her, or made to it. I really like this setup, and it does work with any race. You just have to make some adjustments in the stat pools to get it to balance out. But try to keep it around 35, 36k health with a 25k stamina. If you get a 25k stamina, just put the rest into health. Because once you have the 25k stamina, you're set. Everything else can go into health. You just want to make sure you reach that 25k stamina. So, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So like I said, I hope you guys liked this build. If you did, it'd be great if you guys could hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me or other builds by me, you can hit the subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.